It's real easy to forget at times, especially with how hard they try to push the stories as their stories. But a lot of the stories that Disney has told over the years are directly based on stories coming out of the public domain, or based on children's books that they bought the adaptation rights to, which more often than not end up completely overshadowing the original work and leave any other adaptations of said work to hopelessly try to claw their way out from under Disney's long, mouse-shaped shadow. Such is the nature of today's piece, Pinocchio's Christmas, based very loosely on some of the events portrayed in the original novel, which was published way back in 1883. It plays out as sort of a micro-adventure, a series of semi-related events as Pinocchio experiences his first Christmas. Like some of the earlier specials, that does make the plot kind of difficult to talk about since it's basically a long chain of events that lead into one another, rather than a single cohesive narrative. Like, it starts with Geppetto selling his boots to afford a gift for Pinocchio, a book of arithmetic, but then Pinocchio sells it for some coppers to get Geppetto something, but ends up tricked by the fox and cat into planting them to grow a money tree, and they steal it, forcing Pinocchio to get a job performing in a local puppet show, and it only escalates from there. I actually kind of like this sort of escalation of events rather than having a single centralized villain or conflict. I think it works well for what's supposed to be a children's story about learning various morals. The original book was also like that too, a series of escalating adventures that sort of bled into one another, but didn't really relate to one another as a whole. It's definitely a lot more kid-friendly than the original book, and the special itself probably has a lot less nightmare fuel in it than the Disney adaptation did, considering that it never delves into things like going to Pleasure Island, or being transformed into a donkey, or getting swallowed by the whale. Those things are referenced as further adventures, but not things that actually happen. Heck, Pinocchio doesn't even become a real boy at the end, which is still stated as the primary goal of his here. Sadly, this is also one of the last official Rankin-Bass specials, and that is signaled by a lack of a narrator here. There's no one here to tell the story, which is the first time that's happened since these specials started airing. Instead, the characters have to move the story along themselves, and it feels weirdly empty without someone telling us this as a flashback at this point. I'm rather fond of the characters in this special. It's been a while since we've gotten puppets that I felt were wholly original, rather than looking too much like ones from previous specials, or even just looking like carbon copies to the point where I'm pretty sure they were just repurposed older puppets. This one though, the puppets do look and feel a bit more unique, the exception of Pinocchio himself, who looks like a generic child puppet just given a longer nose. He doesn't look bad, but his design is very reminiscent of most other male children characters that you see in the crowds and backgrounds of the other specials. Animation-wise, it's about what I would expect for a special this late in the run of Rankin-Bass. That is to say, it's very good, rather fluid, easy to follow, and with a lot of really good facial work as well, with the movement feeling less stiff and repetitive, and more natural. Yet again, they stretch their creative muscles with the various settings and sets they use for the scene dressing. In terms of audio, I also think it's pretty good. It's hard to tell because the copy I have is an old VHS transfer, and so a majority of the audio is pretty fuzzy. But bad quality aside, I do think that the performances, at least, are pretty solid. Everyone gives just enough believability to their roles, and most of them are played by veterans of the specials at this point, as most of their voices sound quite familiar to me after watching so many of these. The songs are also pretty nice, with a good mix of silly and heartfelt, which I feel fits the Christmas theme quite nicely. Nothing here that I think I'm particularly going to be humming to myself down the line, except perhaps I never know what gifts to buy, which is relatable enough that it makes me smile a bit when I hear it. Let 'Em Laugh is a pretty frantic and ridiculous villain song which I like, and while it's quite short, I do also really like Love is the Perfect Gift for Christmas Day. It's super cheesy, but it has enough heart to it that it does warm me up a bit, which I feel is pretty important. I do like this one quite a bit. It's a bit out of left field, I think, a Christmas special loosely based on a public domain novel, but it works. If you can hunt it down, I'd give it a watch. I don't necessarily associate Pinocchio with Christmas, but it's a step up compared to associating it with Disney, I think. Pinocchio is one of the weakest classic films that Disney put out, and you know it.